Hi, and thanks for clicking through to watch my latest video. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, my name is Andrew, and my videos follow me around my two favourite areas, the North York Moors National Park and the Yorkshire Heritage Coast. Today, I'm following in the footsteps of one of the world's greatest ever explorers during his early years. Starting on the site where Captain James Cook was born here in Middlesbrough, I'll be making my way out to the North York Moors and down the Yorkshire coast, ending up in Whitby, where he famously learned his trade before going on to explore the world. I'm starting at the birthplace of this local legend here in Marton in Middlesbrough. Most people know the story of James Cook and what he went on to achieve in life, leading 3 great voyages of discovery as a genius navigator and chart maker, and adding a third to the map of the known world in just over a decade. But what's probably less well known, and what I find most intriguing, is the humble beginnings he was born into as the son of a farm labourer, effectively a commoner at the time, which makes his story of success in that era even more remarkable. I'm on familiar turf here in my hometown, and the story of Captain Cook is one I grew up with many school trips to museums and locations connected to him. I was born and grew up about 3 miles from here, and around the whole area there are several homages to the great adventurer. The site of Cook's birth now stands in the glorious Steward Park and is marked by this granite urn. It was erected in 1852 to mark the site of the cottage where Cook was born in October 1728. Just over the road from Steward Park is St Cuthbert's Church, where Cook was baptised. His father, also called James, was a farm labourer who was originally from Scotland. His mother was a local called Grace. At the time of Cook's birth, he had 1 older brother and went on to have 7 siblings. Close to the site of the urn is the Captain Cook Birthplace Museum. It was opened in 1978 on the 250th anniversary of Cook's birth. Inside is a small collection of items relating to James and his family, and memorabilia from his voyages. It's believed the house Cook first lived in here would have been a timber-framed and thatched traditional clay biggin, typically quite a damp and unpleasant place to live. The cottage was a ruin by the late 1780s and was pulled down in changes made by the landowner at the time. Cook lived in Marton until he was 8 years old. I'm now heading back to my car to make the 6-mile journey to Great Ayton, where Cook moved to with his family in 1736. There are 4 locations I'll be visiting here, starting at this farm. The Cook's move to Great Ayton came about when James Cook Sr. secured a new job as a hind for the tenant farmer. This is Airy Home Farm, which is on the edge of the village of Great Ayton. It sits in the shadow of Rosebery Topping, one of this area's most famous landmarks, and it's up there that Cook will have got his first glimpses of the sea. The farm was owned by the lord of the manor in Great Ayton, Thomas Scotto, and the Cooks lived in a cottage here. During that time, the young James would have helped on the farm, tending to livestock and crops in the fields, all the way up to Rosebery Topping. The cottage they lived in was positioned at the top of the hill behind Airyholme Farm. There's no longer anything to see of the house, and these trees have now replaced it. It's still a remote location up here, but it's quite a view they had. Also worth mentioning is Captain Cook's monument, erected in 1827 on the next hill along, known as Easby Moor. It's always been one of my favourite spots in the whole area. The views from up there are spectacular and sit above the village of Great Ayton. The move to Great Ayton was a pivotal point in Cook's life. When the family first arrived here, Thomas Scotto agreed to pay for James to attend the Postgate school in the village. This is the Captain Cook Schoolroom Museum. It's set up as a reconstruction of how the schoolroom might have appeared when Cook was here from 1736 to 1740. Obviously worlds apart from today's education system, but while here he would have received a basic education in reading, writing, arithmetic and religious instruction. As you'd expect, this place is really popular for local school visits, but it's run by a team of volunteers, and since the pandemic they've really been struggling for volunteer staff to get the museum open for the public. They've kindly opened it up for me today to come and film inside for this video. So if you are local and would like to get involved here, I'll put a link in the description below the video to the museum's website where you can find all the info you need for that. While I'm here in Great Ayton, I'm going to jump forward in time briefly. I'm heading to the site of what's known as Cook's Cottage. In 1755, the year that Cook joined the Royal Navy, his father retired from Airyholme Farm and built himself a new home right here. Cook never actually lived here, but it's believed he last visited his father here around Christmas time in 1771. In 1933, the cottage was purchased by an Australian called Russell Grimwade. It was dismantled brick by brick and put into 253 cases and 40 barrels, with everything being recorded and catalogued, and then transported from Great Ayton railway station to Hull docks. When it reached Melbourne in April 1934, it was transported to Fitzroy Gardens in the city to be reassembled, and the cottage was officially handed to Victoria State on October the 15th, 1934. On my first visit to Australia a few years ago, one of the first things I made sure I did was pay a visit to the cottage. Here in Great Ayton, the cottage was replaced by this monument, which was unveiled on the same day that the cottage was handed over in Melbourne. The stones it's built from were quarried in Point Hicks in Australia, the location from which Cook first set eyes on the country. A short walk away is the 12th century All Saints Church, which Cook attended regularly. Of his 7 siblings, 5 are buried here along with his mother. 4 of those 5 siblings died before their 5th birthday. This sculpture in the village square depicts James at the age of 16. This is when he left the family home here to start an apprenticeship by the sea in Staithes. Staithes is about 20 miles from Great Ayton, and it was a thriving shipping village when Cook arrived here in 1745. He came here to work for William Sanderson, a grocer and haberdasher and a close friend of Thomas Scotto. The Sanderson family lived above the shop, while James slept on the floor behind the counter each night. For years when I've walked down this street, I've often thought about what a change it must have been for James, arriving here from his family life on the remote farm. While I'm here, a quick mention to this building, which is now the Staithes Heritage Centre. Inside there is a life-size street scene of how Staithes looked during Cook's time here, complete with the frontage of Sanderson's shop. From the small shop, located on the seafront overlooking the harbour, James would have seen the workings of a busy fishing community and the daily comings and goings of fishing boats and their crew, and he will have interacted with them regularly. Ultimately, this is where James Cook got his first taste for a life at sea. The original building, which housed Sanderson's shop, is no longer here, as it was washed away by the sea during a storm. It was later rebuilt using some of the original stone, and is now a holiday let, known as Captain Cook's Cottage. Cook would have undoubtedly been offered the opportunity to go to sea on the fishing boats at Staithes, but decided against it, perhaps under the guidance of Scotto, who had seen his potential early on, and he would only be here for 18 months before leaving for Whitby to start a very different apprenticeship. Cook arrived in Whitby in 1746 as an 18-year-old to begin his naval career as an apprentice to a well-respected Quaker shipowner called John Walker. The Quaker's approach to life was very sober and industrious, and it's obvious these traits were adopted by James during his career, shaping his approach as a captain and his ability to establish friends and trade with people on his adventures. John Walker's house, where Cook stayed during his apprenticeship, is now the Captain Cook Memorial Museum. This attic room is where Cook and the other apprentices stayed during their time with the Walkers. When Cook arrived here, he could not have come to a better environment. The training and experience he received here equipped him with the skills in seamanship that would serve him well throughout his career. The town was booming at this time and had a thriving shipping industry centred around the shipyards, roperies and sail yards. It also had the 6th largest merchant fleet outside of London. His attic room viewed directly onto what would have been the heart of Whitby's shipbuilding business, with at least 5 major shipyards on the River Esk. Most of the ships built in Whitby were built for carrying bulk loads, such as coal and timber. They were known as the Whitby Cat, and it was in these that Cook first learned his seamanship and navigating skills. It was also here that a Whitby Cat was built named the Earl of Pembroke, the ship which went on to become HMS Endeavour. During his apprenticeship, there are accounts of how intensely Cook studied in his own time, in particular the subjects of mathematics, algebra, geometry, spherical trigonometry, and also navigation and astronomy. The Walker ships operated in the treacherous North Sea and were mainly engaged in the coal trade between the North East and London. Cook's first voyage down to London was on the Freelove in 1747, and then, when his apprenticeship ended in 1749, he signed on to the Three Brothers, where he became a seaman on the ship's official muster roll instead of a servant. It was also at this time that he lost both of his young brothers. In March 1752, Cook's loyalty to John Walker was rewarded with a promotion to mate serving under the ship's master on the Friendship. He remained as the master's mate on the Friendship until 1755. All of this was obviously instrumental in the success he went on to enjoy. However, you have to think that the hardship he was born into, starting in a damp mud-clay house, moving on to working long hours on a farm on the exposed slopes of the North York moors, and then sleeping for a year under a shop counter, must have given him the resilience, the readiness, and mentality and work ethic to succeed to the level to which he did. After 9 years in Whitby learning his trade, the next chapter for Cook was to join the Royal Navy in 1755, just in time for the 7 Years' War with France. And that's where I leave the story, for now. Today, Whitby still has a shipbuilding facility on the River Esk, but the harbour is now largely used as a marina. There are still signs of Cook's legacy here though, with the Endeavour pub overlooking the river, and within stumbling distance of the Walker's house. And then there's the Endeavour Experience at Dock End. A life-size steel replica of the famous ship, with exhibits on view over 2 floors, as well as an onboard restaurant. I've really enjoyed filming this one and have met some great people along the way. Captain James Cook has left a huge legacy in this area of the world, and as with all my videos, I hope this one inspires a few of you to come out and explore the places I've visited today. I would love to follow in the footsteps of Cook around the world and tell the rest of his life story and adventures, and depending on how this channel grows, this is something I will look into doing. For now though, I'm in Whitby, so I'm off for some fish and chips. I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned a bit more about one of this area's most famous and popular sons. If you have, do give it a like and make sure you subscribe to my channel if you're not already. As always, thank you for watching and see you again soon for the next one.